Daniel moved into the apartment building in late November, during that time of year when it already gets dark by the time most people leave work, and the city feels quieter than usual. The building itself wasn't particularly old, but it wasn't new either. Just one of those five-story residential blocks built in the early 2000s, the kind with identical balconies and narrow hallways that always smelled faintly like dust and cleaning chemicals. He chose the place because it was cheap and close to his job. The landlord mentioned that the previous tenant had left suddenly, but Daniel didn't ask why. Apartments in the city changed tenants constantly, and he assumed it was just another normal move. For the first few days, everything felt completely ordinary. Daniel unpacked his boxes, set up his desk near the window, and slowly adjusted to the quiet routine of the building. The walls were thin enough that he could occasionally hear footsteps in the hallway or someone running water in another apartment, but nothing unusual. The only thing he noticed was the man from apartment 34. Daniel lived in 33. He first saw the man on the second night when he was coming back from the grocery store around 9 in the evening. The hallway light near the stairwell flickered once as he stepped inside, and that's when he saw someone standing near the railing. A tall man, maybe in his late 40s, dark jacket, pale face. He wasn't doing anything strange exactly, just standing there, looking down the stairwell like he was waiting for something. When Daniel walked past, the man glanced at him briefly and nodded. Daniel nodded back and continued to his door. That was it. Just another neighbor. But over the next few weeks, Daniel started noticing something unusual. The man from apartment 34 was always in the hallway, not constantly, but often enough that it began to feel strange. Sometimes Daniel would leave for work early in the morning and see him standing near the stairs. Other times, he'd come home late and the man would still be there, leaning slightly against the wall. They never really spoke, just the occasional nod. The building itself was quiet enough that Daniel eventually began recognizing other tenants too, an older woman with a small white dog, a young couple who lived on the top floor, a college student who played music too loudly on weekends. But none of them were around as often as the man from 34. And there was something else. Daniel never once saw him enter or leave his apartment. The door to 34 was always closed. And yet the man kept appearing in the hallway. At first, Daniel assumed their schedules just overlapped in strange ways. But then one night, something happened that made him start paying closer attention. He had come home late from work, around midnight, after staying overtime to finish a project. The building was completely quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound in the hallway echo slightly. As he stepped out of the elevator, he saw the man again. Standing near the stairs, same jacket, same blank expression, Daniel gave the usual nod and started walking toward his door. That's when he heard something, a faint metallic sound, like someone gently tapping the railing. Daniel turned slightly. The man was still there, but now he was looking directly at him, not at his face, at the door to Daniel's apartment. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the man slowly raised his hand and pointed at the door. Daniel frowned. "What?" he asked. The man didn't answer, he just kept pointing. Daniel waited for a few seconds, expecting him to say something, but the hallway remained silent. Finally, Daniel unlocked his door and stepped inside. He assumed it was just a strange neighbor. Maybe someone socially awkward. Maybe someone dealing with something personal. He tried not to think about it. But the next morning, he noticed something that made him uneasy. There were 3 long scratch marks on the outside of his apartment door. Not deep, but clearly visible, like someone had dragged something sharp across the wood. Daniel stared at them for a long moment before leaving for work. At first, he assumed they had been there before. Maybe he just hadn't noticed. Still, the image of the man pointing at the door stayed in his mind the entire day. That evening, Daniel decided to ask the landlord about apartment 34. He called him while standing in the parking lot outside the building. "Hey," Daniel said casually. "Quick question. The guy in 34, what's his name?" There was a pause on the phone. "What do you mean?" the landlord asked. "The neighbor, tall guy, dark jacket. I see him in the hallway all the time." Another pause, longer this time. Then the landlord said something that made Daniel feel suddenly cold. "There's no one living in 34. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? It's empty, the landlord said. Has been for 2 years. Daniel laughed nervously. That's not possible. I see him almost every day. The landlord hesitated before answering. Listen, he said slowly. The last tenant, who lived in 34, died. Daniel felt a strange pressure in his chest. What happened? He fell down the stairwell. Silence filled the phone call for a few seconds. Then the landlord added quietly, they found him at the bottom of the stairs one morning. Daniel ended the call soon after that. That night, he took the elevator upstairs like usual. The hallway was empty. No one near the stairs. Daniel unlocked his apartment and went inside quickly, telling himself the landlord's story had just gotten into his head. But around 2 in the morning, he woke up suddenly. At first, he didn't know why. Then he heard it. A faint sound outside his door. A slow, dragging noise, like something moving along the wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. His heart started beating faster. Daniel got out of bed quietly and walked toward the door. The hallway light seeped through the small gap at the bottom, casting a thin yellow line across the floor, and then a shadow passed across that line. Someone was standing outside. Daniel froze. For several seconds, the hallway remained completely silent. Then came 3 slow knocks. Not loud, but deliberate. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Eventually, the footsteps moved slowly down the hallway, toward the stairs. The next morning, Daniel opened his door carefully. The hallway was empty, but the scratches on his door were deeper now, longer, like someone had been trying to claw their way inside. And for the first time since moving into the building, Daniel noticed something else. The scratches didn't stop at his door. They continued across the hallway floor, thin lines carved into the dust, dragging toward the stairwell. Daniel followed them slowly. The air felt colder near the stairs. The building was silent, too silent. The scratches continued down the first few steps, then suddenly stopped, right next to the railing. Daniel leaned forward slightly and looked down into the dark stairwell. 5 floors below, the concrete landing was barely visible in the dim emergency light. And that's when he heard a voice behind him, very close, almost whispering, "You're standing in the same place." Daniel froze. Slowly, he turned. The man from apartment 34 was standing there, closer than ever before. His face looked pale, almost gray in the weak hallway light. The railing gave way, the man said quietly. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What? The man pointed to the floor near Daniel's feet. There's a crack. Daniel looked down, and for the first time he noticed it. A thin fracture in the concrete near the edge of the stairwell. It only breaks when someone leans too far, the man said. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the man stepped slightly closer. Daniel instinctively leaned against the railing. A small metallic creak echoed through the stairwell. And suddenly Daniel understood something. The scratches on the door, the hallway, the floor. They weren't trying to get inside. They were trying to warn him. But by the time Daniel realized that, the railing finally snapped. And the last thing anyone in the building heard that night was the sound of something heavy falling down the stairwell.